You want to know what happens next? You want to know what happens next? Yes, you do. Chapter 3. The Scene. My car beeped its lame farewell, and the full heat of the day hit me. I suddenly remembered why wandering the desert is considered a punishment. The asphalt gave off a smell like oil waiting to bubble to the surface. The heat had its own warbling sound. It was an old warped 45 being played at 78 speed on a gramophone with a broken speaker. If the coroner's van was here, the bodies must still be here. The oven we lived in was supposed to hit 115 degrees by 2 o'clock. Cletus better wrap up things quick before desiccation set in. I started walking before my shoes started to melt. As I passed the van, I saw vehicles from at least 3 more agencies, including Homeland Paternity. I hate those pricks. They're the kind of guys who expect porn star sex without offering a girl so much as a tissue to clean her face after the money shot. Next to their conspicuous unmarked was the even more conspicuous unmarked that could only be from the FBI. There was a van from a cleanup crew, but it looked like they were sampling the free coffee in the gift shop. They couldn't do their thing until everyone else was finished. I wasn't worried. Most of the locals had seen me around enough to know they don't have high enough clearance to know who I actually work for. They draw their own conclusions and we get along well. Human assumption can be a valuable tool if you know how to work it. I tend to dress in loosely woven, collarless dress shirts and linen jackets. When you've spent as much time in the desert as I have, you'll appreciate the importance of durable, lightweight textiles. I don't tolerate wrinkles. It's a minor enough use of my power to look freshly pressed at all times, and I can justify the indulgence. A crisp linen jacket, smartly worn, screams excess. The haphazard way I wear fatigue pants that are custom made to match tends to make your average public servant think I spend more on my clothes than they earn in a year. I wear a leather explorer's hat. That's older than this city, but looks like it's only begun to acquire a character. And I've been told my ensemble makes it appear as though I've just returned from some sort of covert operation in the Amazon. Sometimes I wish that were true. They have rain in the Amazon. I approached the tour entrance to the boneyard and was greeted by the necessary cliche of crime scene tape. I made my way through like a clumsy six-fingered man playing cat's cradle. Jesus, Ray, I just got the tape to stick. I knew that voice well. Dan Marks is an oddity for a town like Las Vegas. He's a cop that didn't get stuck in the job while trying to be something else. He's not an amateur magician or an out-of-work ventriloquist. Dan is a cop because a cop is what Dan has always wanted to be. He's a decent and capable young guy, which is probably why he always pulls shit details like this one. I've never heard Dan complain. He knows a secret. Shit details usually yield the most useful information. I'd be willing to bet that Dan has some sort of master plan, but only time will tell. Sorry, I said. I made a show of replacing the tape, then moved over to the shady spot where Dan was nesting. How bad is it? Which do you mean? Asked Dan. The crime scene or the clusterfuck? Which one is worse? I asked, playing along. The gallows humor was a clear indicator of his tension. You'd never know it from all the feds, no offense. But the scene, hand to God, Ray, I don't have the words. With all the suits hovering around, it's like all the vultures got to get a taste. He took a long swig from his water bottle. Dan came prepared. I don't trust these assholes. Most of them wouldn't piss on a guy to put him out if he was on fire, and they're all waiting around doing nothing while they wait for permission to fart. We got to get this one. Don't know how he could do worse, but it feels like he's just warming up. Even I can see that. Trust your instincts, Danny. And I did. If Danny has an ounce of ambition, he'll make detective before he reaches 30. Now you're here, I know who's in charge. Anything I can do to help, I mean that, anything. Dan looked around, then gestured toward a path to the left. If you go up that way, you should be able to do your thing before the vultures see you and start behaving themselves. Thanks, boss, I said. I turned to leave, but stopped myself. I placed a hand on the young cop's shoulder, looked him in the eye. You're the real deal, Danny. We'll get him. Dan relaxed visibly. I doubt he realized how tense he'd been, but he hadn't let it cripple him. That was good information to have. I gave the side of his shoulder a solid cuff and crossed the furnace between Dan's nest and the path he'd indicated. I circled around a huge display of old signs. There were pieces of metal sticking out that looked like they might have been dangerous before the place had been turned into a tourist trap. Disconnected wires were rolled into neat piles and secured off the path. The ever-present Vegas dust puffed up in small clouds as I followed the path between the islands of retired neon signs. They seemed somehow sad and wilting in the glaring light from above and the desolate lot where they'd been laid to rest. Once sparkling and welcoming, a testament to hedonism, now they lay flat and uninspired like some lethargic death row inmate who's given up and only looks ahead toward the end. I followed the path around as instructed. I could hear Dan's vultures squawking at each other in an effort to compare whatever vultures compare instead of penis size. I could tell by the direction of the voices and the smell that I was circling around behind the crime scene. The path seemed to take me off track, but I knew my young friend wouldn't steer me wrong. After another 50 feet or so, the path sloped up and around to the right. It led me to a slight rise behind and above the vultures. The vantage point afforded me a more or less unobstructed view of the scene. As the tableau came into view, below me, I wished that Dan had been less capable. The glare from the fireball above did nothing to lessen the impact of the scene. It simply changed the dynamic to something more wasted and barren, scarecrows instead of china dolls. Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah had been posed on pole stands like child-sized versions of those indistinct wooden models artists use in figure drawing classes. They had been dismembered, their bodies sectioned, then wired back together. Their impaled forearms had been run through and attached to a wide round base, half buried in the ground. Their hips and torsos were off-center, as if to display the ability to swivel. Even from this distance, it was clear that the parts that made up each figure were from different owners. I couldn't tell if the girls had been reassembled at random or if there was some sort of design at work. Cletus could help me determine that. The girls' knees had been set in a kneeling position, though either their calves or feet had been attached backward so that their toes pointed skyward behind them. Their heads had been impaled on the central poles so that they hung suspended above the neck. All three formed a perfectly straight line across. The killer must have used a level to accomplish it. They seemed to be held in place by hands that seemed only loosely attached to the arms beneath. Sarah's head was attached with 9-inch spikes driven through the hands and into the eyes. Rebecca's was attached in the same manner, but with the spikes driven through the hands and into the ears. 2 hands covered Leah's mouth. A single spike had been driven through both with such force that it had gone through the support pole and could be seen protruding through the once golden braid she always wore hanging down her back. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I wanted to scream, but who would listen? I wanted to weep, but feared I would never stop. I wanted to retch, but owed these girls my strength. I had to remain clinical, detached. The rasping breeze meandered across the scene and brought with it the overwhelming and cloying scent of congealing blood. The stench seemed to cloy to my nostrils and coat my skin. Why were there no flies? Where are the flies? I didn't hear or see any flies. I closed my eyes. I had to concentrate. Where was the blood stink coming from? When I opened them again, I was able to look at parts of the scene I hadn't picked out before. The vision of the girls had been such an assault on my mind that they were all I'd been able to see. Before each figure, I had to think of them as figures, to avoid going mad, sat a cheap 5-gallon plastic bucket, the kind you get for $9.99 at Home Depot. Each bucket was filled to between a quart and a quart and a half of blood. The killer had been kind enough to mark the measurement on the outside in thick black marker, along with the taunting words, "Guess who?" Not a drop of blood was visible at the scene. The individual parts of each figure had been meticulously cleaned. In front of each bucket was a grave. The plots seemed large enough for the figure displayed behind it, but each had already been refilled with dirt and carelessly packed down. Behind the entire tableau, as if to frame the scene, in a round archway was the message, "Suffer the children." I knew the reference, but found the usage here to be slightly off, out of context. What was he trying to say? I filled the question in for later. I heard raised voices from the scene below me. The vultures had moved beyond, squawking and on to a preening sort of shouting match. Gray-suited vulture versus blue-suited vulture. "It could be 3 more victims," squawked Gray Suit. He wore mirrored shades, and the product he'd used to slick back his plumage was melting into a permanent stain on his expensive jacket. 112 degrees, and he's sticking to the regulation jacket. I confer upon him the title of dumbass and turn my attention to Blue Suit. This one, at least, has the good sense to take off the jacket and carry it over his shoulder from the collar loop. I'd be tempted to be more generous with his title, but he displays a vocabulary consisting of 4 words that constitute his answer to everything. In my mind, I name him Officer Parrot. "It could be 3 more victims," squawked Dumbass. "You don't know that, Parrot, Officer Parrot." "You're right, I don't know that," agrees Dumbass, "because you refuse to dig them up." "I didn't say that," says Parrot, forcing me to reconsider his title. "While you're waiting for permission, we're wasting valuable time. The longer these girls are out here, the more evidence we lose," says Dumbass. I had to reconsider his title as well. "You don't know that," says Parrot. I, in fact, did know that, so I took matters into my own hands. I hopped down from the rise and headed straight for the closest grave, pulling nitrile gloves from my pocket and snapping them loudly into place as I went. When I reached the mound, I rolled up my sleeves. Without a shovel, I dug with my bare hands. The grave was shallow. It took only a few handfuls of dirt to find what lay beneath. This one belonged to Sarah. She cared about it, loved it. She wrote her name on the tag. Perhaps more telling was the fact that she had it with her at the end. As I took in the scene before me, I couldn't tell whether the teddy bear buried at the feet of each girl was meant to be an act of kindness or some sort of final monstrosity. Had the killer let them keep their bears as a sort of comfort, or so they could be torn away later and used as a final cruelty, a hammered end cap that sealed childhood's demise? Each miniature grave was marked with a blood-soaked cross of take-out chopsticks, staked upside down into the ground. Their haphazard separation in vivid contrast to the meticulous reconstruction of the small defiled figures above them. Standing so close, Sarah's teddy bear in my hands, it was even harder to think of them as figures, but I had to. Detachment would allow me to think clearly, see clearly. The figure behind me was not a little girl. Little girls don't come with interchangeable parts. I clutched the stuffed toy close. Under the smell of dust and blood, I could make out a hint of fabric softener mingled with some sort of lavender sachet. The inexpertly repaired left eye was coming loose. Had a button ever seemed so accusing? Could a mouth made of felt look beseeching? The bear wanted justice. I'm sure the other two would as well. I spotted Cletus near the archway and headed in his direction. I made it halfway there before Dumbass and Parrot stepped into my path. I couldn't tell if they were pleased to have a common enemy or if they were going to come to blows over who would send me packing. Parrot reached me first, but it was Dumbass who said, "Who the fuck are you, and what do you think you're doing?" "I, the fuck, am Raguel, and I think I'm inspecting my crime scene." "You're relieved." "Like hell," said Parrot. "Hot enough, isn't it, boys?" "You're relieved as well. I'll take it from here. I'll be liaising with the new office on Lake Mead. Be at your desks when I call." Wait a fucking... Dumbass was turning interested shades of red. Parrot had the good sense to keep his mouth shut. I whisked my bag quickly across both sets of eyes. "I don't think I will. It's pushing 150 degrees out here. I've got flesh mummifying, blood turning to jello, and 2 more teddy bears to exhume, not to mention what looks like the ugly stepchild of a bullshit television procedural standing around waiting for craft services on the taxpayer's dime." "You don't know that," countered Parrot. His heart didn't seem in it, and I didn't know what lack of knowledge he meant. "I sure as hell know who gets the scrape the blood out of those buckets when it turns into Aunt Edna's Thanksgiving garnish. I hope you brought a whole box of gloves, gentlemen." "We're not together, sir." So Dumbass was with Homeland Absurdity. That made Parrot FBI. I should have tagged them earlier, would have, but the scene was too traumatic. "Well then," I said, continuing in my best R. Lee Ermey. Whenever I think drill sergeant, I think of Lee Ermey. His performance in Full Metal Jacket was iconic. "I suggest you show me some stunning interagency cooperation and get the incompetent asses out of my boneyard." Parrot silently reached his right hand into his pants pocket to give me his card. "Don't you think I can't find you if I want to? At your desks, gentlemen. You do not want me to have to hunt you down. Leave your papers with the officer on your way out. He might even care about your bona fides." I shot a look at Cletus, who had almost coughed up a tonsil in an attempt to stifle a laugh. Your average person would probably find crime scene etiquette offensive. It's hard to explain. The more heinous the scene is, the funnier everything else seems to be. It's a coping mechanism. "There will be a report." Apparently, Parrot thought I was intimidated by bureaucracy. He had obviously never met Uriel. "Do you have any idea how much bureaucracy it takes to negotiate the interplay of celestial spheres?" Fucking novices. When I said nothing, both suits turned on their meticulously shined heels and headed off to pick on a smaller fish. I wasn't worried. These idiots were no match for Danny. Before the suits were even out of sight, Cletus's team went right to work doing what they should have been doing hours ago. I have to hand it to Vegas's crime scene folks. They know their shit. When most of the English-speaking world thinks they know your job, it helps to be good at it. Cletus Monroe stood watch over his people with the relaxed air of a patient professor taking the time to watch his prize students at work, which was exactly what he was doing. He was a tall man and fit. Cletus loves to hike the desert places. At 50 years old, he regularly boulders with enthusiasts half his age, most of them women. He's the only black man I've ever known that can somehow manage to exude the look of a healthy tan. He wears a fishing hat over his brilliantly shiny head. I once asked him how he got it to gleam like that. He told me, pussy juice and muff buffing. I don't care what the beer commercials say. Cletus Monroe is the most interesting man in the world. Were I human, he would probably be my hero. He also happens to be a world-class forensic pathologist and an excellent medical doctor. He's patched me up any number of times, and though he knows I'm not human, he's never questioned me about it. Perhaps most importantly, Cletus is my friend, even when I can't be his. He approached me. The oversized fishing hat protected the world from the glare of his pate and emphasized his shaking head. I extended my hand to him. Instead of taking it, He used my arms as leverage to pull me into a manly hug. I know how hard this must be for you, Cletus spoke softly. His innate kindness seemed to loose the tension I'd been ignoring. I hugged him back. But I'd be lying if I didn't feel a little better myself knowing you're on it. We released each other before anyone got the wrong idea. It's kids, I said. I know, said Cletus. We'll get you what you need to find the bastard. Just leave a piece of him for me, will you? I'll do what I can, I said. But this might not be my jurisdiction. What? This isn't freaky enough for you? Freaky has nothing to do with it. If this is just some sick bastard, it's not my bailiwick. Don't use flashy words like that with us mere mortals. Sounds like an excuse. Hey man, I want to tear this guy apart as much as the next public servant, but it just doesn't work that way. I'm just saying, I know, and trust me, you're not the only one. Old lady giving you grief? These are kids, Cletus. She grieves for each one lost, and they're girls, which makes it worse. I'm just glad the RJ showed some uncharacteristic taste and left out the details. If she got a look at this, a whole new kind of trouble, you have no idea. That bad? You familiar with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? The part with Lot's daughters? Yeah, but didn't they get him drunk and rape him? Misogynistic propaganda. The rape of the angels was allegorical. His own girls were the last of his victims. He was the first to go, and the wife knew about it. That's how bad. You're shitting me. I didn't answer. My stare was all the answer he needed. Fuck, said Cletus. Yup, said I. The scene is pretty straightforward, but could you answer some questions for me? If I can, but so far, what you see is what you get. The rest will have to wait until we sort it all back in the lab. Fair enough. I took the horror from another angle. You think this is the end of it? No, said Cletus. Yeah, he's just getting started, said I. Fuck, we chorused. Okay, thank you all for being here for Chapter 3, Episode 2 of our virtual beta read. I hope you were able to follow. And as always, I welcome your comments down at the bottom. Give me feedback. I want to know what you think so that I can create the best novel that I can for the target audience, which tends to be sort of dark, gothy kind of people. So metalheads unite. Leave me your comments. Leave me your feedback. I want to know. I want to know. All right. As always, take care of your mind, body, and spirit, particularly in these times where that's so important. And remember, your words have power, so choose them wisely. This is Adam with the Inkstain channel. Remember to like, subscribe if you like what we do here. Hit that bell so you know when we drop new videos, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.